All right, Father, I'm glad to have you on.
Yes, Gregory, I appreciate you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, you came recommended by a viewer on my channel, and so when he recommended you, I went to your channel and I subscribed, and I found this sermon that I had of yours that I had put on my community section, which is where you were talking about outside the church, no salvation. There was a sermon of yours, so because I was going through a particular series of that on my own channel, and so I liked it, so I subscribed. And so I was listening, and I'm in your stuff will come on my feed as I'm looking through it. I noticed that you had a video of 3 Days of Darkness on there. That so now again, I wanted to do interview priests that are not as well known. Okay, but you got 1 trillion views now on that video, so maybe you're like the most popular.
Not quite. It's 115,000, I think, as of today.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. Why don't you just briefly tell us, because I'm sure your own subscribers or listeners or whatever might be interested. How did that come about, that video?
So my parents always talked about the 3 Days of Darkness growing up. I remember my dad always used to have a votive candle, like a sanctuary lamp, always lit at our home altar at home when we were growing up. And we always talked about it. So I've always known about it. And especially with the events of last year, I started getting quite excited about this whole, with the 3 Days of Darkness, because of the Ukraine war that could possibly lead to World War III. And I found out about another visionary in Bavaria who more specifically stated that basically that the 3 Days of Darkness would come at the end of World War III. Bishop Ramolla, of course, is from Bavaria, and he and I looked up some things with this visionary, Alois Illmeyer, and I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And I didn't really get to it last year. I was thinking myself or Bishop Ramolla to make a video on the 3 Days of Darkness. Never really got to it. But this year, especially after seeing Father Radecki's short little video, I thought I really need to talk about this subject. I think it's very important that Catholics will be aware of this, and if those days come in our lifetime, that we be prepared for it, to save our bodies from this chastisement, and to pray that God will mitigate it.
Well, for those who don't know, that video was something that I uploaded because I was there. Father was giving a kind of a catechism class for adults in some way, because they were having the sisters come in for the children, and he allowed us to record his comments, and it was a kind of like I think it was a question that a parishioner had asked previous, like he had a set of recorded like questions. And then he mentioned that, and I uploaded it.
Yeah, that was definitely an impetus to make that video, and the fact that it seems no other traditional Catholic priest actually talks about this, or I don't know if they believe it privately, but it doesn't seem like any traditional Catholic priest has put anything on the internet or on YouTube publicly, saying we should pay attention to this. And then we had, little did I know too, Father Gabriel then had his 10-minute Q&A at the at Mount St. Michael's at the Fatima conference, again, sort of reiterating what Father Dominic Radecki had said in that other short video, explaining a little more why he didn't believe it was authentic and why he didn't believe the church approved of it. I thought it was interesting that you put out that video right around the same time, or maybe even a day after I put out my video with the 3 Days of Darkness. They happened to come together right at the same time.
I'm surprised at how much that has taken off.
Same here. I had no idea I would get that many views.
Why don't you tell us, Father, a little bit about, let's say, like who ordained you and the chapel that you're part of? Maybe a little bit of that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yes, I was ordained almost 7 years ago, December 10th, 2016, in Mason, Ohio, by Bishop Marcellus Moylan, and I've been working ever since then at Our Lady of Victory. Well, at first it was a chapel. It was just a small space in a small shopping mall, and then we moved to a little church in Fairfield, Ohio. So I have been working there as a priest, but not only there. Sometimes I fly back to where my parents live in the Big Island of Hawaii. We have some missions too. We have a mission in New Mexico, in Georgia, and then we also now have associate priests who work in Germany, Bishop Ramolla's homeland, Vaterland, where I have been several times as well, working as a priest, visiting people, and he has as well, quite a bit since my ordination in 2016.
Now, you said this is Our Lady of Victory. You said it started out at a mall, you said? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, so I guess we could say I was still seminarian, but we officially opened our doors at the end of 2015.
Okay.
Prior to that, we were working on getting a visa for Bishop Ramolla, and so he had to be some time in Germany. The first building that we had was from 2016 to 2015 to 2019. It was just a small space in a mall, nondescript, but we made it very nice inside with curtains, a lot of statues and everything. But the rent got too expensive, and we were surrounded by a woman's gym and a Mexican restaurant. We needed to find a better location.
Sure.
So we looked for quite a while until we found a church that was a good size for us, not too big or too small, and that was affordable. And we found a Protestant church, or a former Protestant church in Fairfield, Ohio, and then we purchased that and moved in there in just before Christmas 2019. And so we've been there for now, and that's currently where, if people subscribe and watch our masses live on YouTube, that's where they will see the masses being offered in a little church that used to be Protestant, but now we converted it into a little Catholic church.
Oh, nice. So, okay, so you're with Bishop Ramolla, and is it just you and him, or is there other priests that are work together?
In the U.S., it's just myself and Bishop Ramolla. We do have we have two associate priests who work closely with us in Germany. We do have some other loose contacts, not really working together as of now, but we do have some other contacts as well in the U.S. and in Europe.
Did you grow up as a traditional Catholic?
Yes and no. So my parents left the Novus Ordo church, our local parish church, when I was 6. I still have memories of some of the Hawaiian singing during masses, and the priest who was Samoan, had a nice beard and long hair like Jesus, and who was inspired to become a priest when he was dating his girlfriend after he had seen a clown mass. So
all right.
It tells you a bit about
vocations.
Yeah, it tells you a bit about that church as it was now. Ironically, at this point in time, there's a Filipino priest there who's very conservative, who's saying the Latin Mass as well.
What island is this, Father?
This is the Big Island of Hawaii. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, the Big Island. Okay, so they're actually doing an adult mass, Latin Mass out there at the Big Island?
Yeah.
Is this, you said currently?
Yeah.
Wow. I just find it interesting. Okay.
I find it very interesting too. God's ways are just interesting. Life is just very weird, because I think it's a good. If this priest because I doubt his validity, being that he was ordained in the Novus Ordo.
Sure.
I met him back in February. Very nice man. If he had come back when my parents were still discerning, let's say 1995, 1996, when they would spend, I remember, hours in the parking lot, my parents and my uncles and my aunts, just discussing what the priest said in the sermon and what's wrong, and what's going on, and trying to find the truth. If that priest had come there, we would have stopped searching. We probably would have been happy. Like, it was a very conservative priest. He had the Latin Mass. But as it was, obviously that didn't happen. So eventually, towards the end of 1996, my dad, I remember he sat us all down and he's like, we're not going to church this Sunday, and this is why. And it was very difficult for him. He felt bad in the conscience, not to go to church on Sunday, but he felt he had to finally break with the Novus Ordo. But eventually, his business was doing well at that time. He was able to bring a traditional Catholic priest to Hawaii for a year. This priest had formerly been ordained with the Society of St. Pius X, and he came to Hawaii for a year. So that was my first experience with the Latin Mass. We had the opportunity to go to daily Mass. My father was able to rent a small house for this priest and on some land, and we were trying to build up a traditional Catholic community. Unfortunately, some things happened and it didn't work out. But then after this priest left, we found out that the Society of St. Pius X had been sending a priest once a month to the islands, to the Hawaiian Islands. And so in 1998, we started going to the Society of St. Pius X.
The priest that was coming out there for a year, you said he was with the society? Is that correct?
He had been.
Okay.
Yeah, then he left them and he was somewhat working with the Fraternity of St. Peter.
Okay, got it. Okay, so then he left. And this is okay. So the society would come to the islands. Did they rotate around the islands, or did they have a place where you guys have to fly to, let's say, to Oahu or something?
Yes, they have a mission in Oahu and then on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Oh, so they would also come to the Big Island as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So they have.
Is that still the case?
It is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so okay. So they fly out. So that way, your parents didn't have to hop a plane to a different island to go to Mass, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Actually, the society says Mass in my uncle's house or in his shop, which he converts into I think a fairly nice chapel.
Oh, currently that happens.
Yeah, they still send a priest out once a month.
And they have Mass at your family's place.
My uncle's house.
So your family was, would you say they're instrumental in bringing the society out there, or is there?
No, actually, I don't know who started originally to bring them to the Big Island. I don't know how long they had been coming before we found out about them coming to the Big Island. So no, we were not instrumental in bringing them, but we found out that they were coming and then started going there.
Okay. And how long were you attending the Society of St. Pius X? From what age, roughly what ages were you?
So my family started attending them regularly when I was 8 in 1998. I was born in 1990. Mm-hmm. And I was attending them until I went to their minor seminary in Australia, Holy Cross Seminary, in 2006. What
prompted you to feel a call to the priesthood? I'm assuming while you're at the Society back in the chapel.
Yeah, I don't. Well, of course, I was very young, but I don't recall being inspired by the Novus Ordo priest at all to pursue the priesthood. But I have to credit the society where credit's due. A lot of the priests who came in, especially in the first years when we went there, mm-hmm. Really even until I started going to their minor seminary, the caliber of those priests was, sad to say, much better than the ones they're now producing. Of course, now I have the differences between us of, they recognize and resist the person they call Pope, and yeah, obviously I have grave theological differences in that regard. But as a young boy, I was inspired by a lot of them. Some of them weren't so inspiring, but many of them were. I thought, wow, these priests are coming from a great distance. They have to travel to say Mass, hear people's confessions. They not only say Mass here in Hilo in Hawaii, but they also just flew from Honolulu saying an earlier Mass. And, some of them were very zealous and full of fire for the faith. And I thought, wow, that's just wonderful. And I believe my vocation really came through the good example of some of those priests. And I felt that's what I want to do too. I want to be able to save souls, to hear confessions, to bring Jesus to people in the Holy Mass. And There was one priest too, he was Australian. I was, since I was 10 or 11, I started, writing him as a pen pal, old school letters. And he very much encouraged me when I told him I wanted to be a priest. So that was quite wonderful. And God called me really at a young age, about 10 or 11. I felt the call rather strongly and clearly, and it gave me direction for the rest of my life.
You said that you ended up going to the seminary in Australia. What was that process like? And is that why there as opposed to, I don't know, I think they have a seminary maybe in Virginia, or
yeah, good question.
Where they have all their seminaries, but I'm just curious why the one in Australia. Or I guess first question would be, what's the process like to do that? Like you have to talk to the priest and let them know your interests, or how's that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the reason why I went to Australia was because it was, first of all, minor seminary, and then the rector was Father Peter Scott, who had been the district superior for the SSPX in the United States, and he had been to Hawaii several times, so he knew my parents and he knew us. When his terms were up in the U.S. of being the district superior, he went to Australia to be rector of Holy Cross Seminary, and then he opened up a minor seminary, which was more or less a boarding school for high school boys attached to the major seminary. But then we could take part in the liturgy and have more emphasis on Latin, Gregorian chant, and all that.
Now, this is maybe my ignorance. I'm not that familiar with like the minor seminary, the major seminary. So this particular place in Australia is only a minor seminary. They don't ordain priests there.
No, they had a major seminary, but when Father Scott went there and became their new rector, he established a minor seminary as well.
Oh, as well. Okay, on top of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so they would, and so this would be for like high school age boys.
Yes.
Correct? For the minor. Okay.
8 to 12, basically. 8th grade to 12th grade.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, completing a high school, but attached to the major seminary, so that we could take part in the liturgy as well, and with more.
So, what grades were you when you went there?
So, Australia, the school year's also scheduled around the seasons. So I went there first in February 2006, which is their fall, their autumn, down in the southern hemisphere. I was there then basically almost the whole year, February 2006 to December 2006, and I was there then half of 2007. So more or less 16, 17 months in Australia.
Okay. And then what happened? Why were you no longer there? Or what did you?
Yeah. So that's where my journey, I think it's a lot more interesting. I was readily accepted by Father Scott. He had already taken in my older brother, who was trying out the minor seminary as well. So he had been there a couple years before me, and we flew together.
Let me stop you. I didn't even think to ask this. How many are in your family?
I'm
You have an older brother?
Yes, I have an older brother. I'm number 4 of 10.
Get out of here. 4 of 10. Wow. Okay, nice.
Yeah. My eldest sister, Monica, she passed away when she was 13 in 1997. So there are 9 of us living, 6 boys and 4 girls, 3 living.
Are they all living in Hawaii other than yourself?
No. Let's see. I have 4 siblings in Hawaii, and then the rest are in the U.S. mainland.
Are they all part of different traditional chapels?
You could say that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll get more to that. That's what I heard you say, older brother. I'm like, I shouldn't even think of to ask that. I'm just curious. Okay, back to your story with the
seminary.
You were there for about you said almost like sound like a year and a half. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically a year and a half.
And then you were no longer there. So then what happened with that, or what? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, so after a while in the seminary, I started sensing something wasn't right. Um, and if I could sum it up, it would be a lack of love, a lack of charity, big time, and at least for us minor seminarians, a great lack of spirituality. Um, when we entered the minor seminary, we had 1 day of recollection at the beginning of the school year, and that was pretty much it. Like we dove into the liturgy. We did, we chanted prime and sext and compline. We helped chant the mass and stuff, but we weren't actually very much taught like all the meanings of it. Marian devotion was not emphasized very much at all, and this unfortunately seems to be somewhat a systemic problem in the Society of St. Pius X with devotion to Mary. For
Do
instance,
you?
we
Oh,
never
wait, go ahead.
said the Rosary together on Sundays,
Hmm.
and it wasn't emphasized like you need to have the great devotion to Our Lady to protect your purity, to protect your vocation. Um, I noticed it was very disturbing. I noticed with my own brother that he was in a very dark place towards that first semester in 2006, and he left halfway through the year. A lot of boys left halfway through the year, and many times they left and when they left, they were angry towards the superiors. They were internally disturbed. They were distraught, and many times less pious leaving than when they first entered. And I thought, well, what's going on here? Like, that's not right. You go into a seminary and you come in generally from decent families, maybe open to the priesthood. Father Scott didn't make it a requirement that you were like definitely wanted to be a priest.
Sure.
It was sort of a general thing, like, okay, if you want to be a priest, this might be a place to help you discern. But at the end of the year, it was like almost none of the boys would ever even consider being a priest, and they all started literally hating the place. It was quite bad, actually.
Not to get too into too many details, but you're at the minor seminary? Do you think that just filtered over into the major seminary or the
Yes,
seminarians, or do you think there was a big difference between? You said yes.
yes, they probably have more spirituality, but my brother and I and other friends who have been with the society, even Bishop Ramolla, who had some experience with the society, and for any society goers or priests who might hear this interview, please take this criticism as constructive criticism, because I know they're the biggest traditional group out there, but they really need to up their game in many ways. No, there are systemic problems within the Society of St. Pius X, and some places are a little better than others. Some vectors are a little better than others. But at first, I thought maybe it was just this place, but
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced that no, it's St. Mary's, Kansas has similar issues. Other seminaries have similar issues. They're very heavily French influenced, the Society of St. Pius X. For
Okay.
them, French is the best. They're very proud of, if you can speak French or have French culture. The problem with that, it seems that they've had some influence of the errors of Jansenism, at least in practice. So
Okay.
I
Explain that a little bit.
yeah,
What you mean by errors of
I know.
Jansenism?
Let me try to break this down. I'm not accusing them of being Jansenist heretics, but Jansenism was basically a Catholic form of Calvinism, where they taught false doctrines concerning grace, and in practice they were very harsh. Like, they got a lot of people away from daily communion or from frequent communion, because you had to be basically a saint in order to receive communion.
Hmm.
And they're very much about external penances and mortifications, like whipping yourself or fasting a lot and all that. And they hated devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, because they were very, they were away from like the love part of our religion, which is the heart of our religion, is the heart of the gospel. And I felt that very keenly in Australia. you know, it's just rules for the sake of rules. If you're externally, you know, doing well in school or in sports or getting good grades, you come on time to the prayers, you're good. But you could be prideful, you could be, you know, egoistic, run over other people's emotions, you know, be brutally cruel verbally towards others, and that was okay. You know, make fun of others in public and humiliate, especially like the freshmen. I saw a lot of boys there who were very hurt. You know, it was a lot of emphasis on the externals. And
Did you rate? Okay, so you saw this going on. Did you raise this to the attention of maybe Father Scott or whoever was in charge?
No, I didn't. I was just, you know, 16-year-old
Sure.
at the time. I probably wouldn't have had the courage to.
Okay, so you saw this going on, Father. You just said, okay, I'm good. I'm gonna go back to Hawaii and go to school there.
That was a temptation. So at the end of the first year, the best friend that I had in Australia, we were talking about these things a lot. He had been to a different Novus Ordo monastery in British Columbia in Canada, and he had a different experience with training. And he's like, they are playing mind games here in the seminary. And he warned me. He said, if you stay here, your character is going to change. And that really scared me because I knew what he meant. I'd seen other boys, you know, become prideful, angry, resentful, more worldly, you know, almost hating the priest. And I'm like, I don't want to be like that. And so at the end of that school year, I was talking to my parents, and my friend had told me about the CMRI because his sister is a nun, a blue nun with the CMRI, and he had visited their minor seminary, and he's like, hey, there's another minor seminary. I'm like, what? I didn't know. He's like, well, they're religious and they have devotion to Our Lady. And he's like, well, they're sede vacandis. I'm like, it wasn't a problem for me. I never really thought about that issue.
And was that the first time you had heard about that issue?
No. I heard about it from a video of the diamonds, but it wasn't. I don't remember we talked about it much in the minor seminary, if at all. It wasn't on my radar. I didn't really think about it much at all. When I went back to Hawaii for that summer break, which is December in Australia, I talked to my parents, and I'm like, I really want to leave. I want to go try out this new seminary. But they convinced me, like, you know, you should just stick it out, try to stay with the SSPX and go back to Australia. So I did.
Yeah, because they were. I mean, were they familiar? They probably weren't familiar with the CMRI, were they?
Not really, but around the same time, my dad too was starting to study more, and he was very disturbed with certain issues. Like he had spoken with Father Scott about like canonizations, for instance. Like,
yeah,
like, Father, aren't canonizations infallible? And Father's like, oh no, because they changed the rules of canonization. You know, not 2 more miracles anymore, but 1, and blah blah blah. And my dad's like, it didn't make sense to him. Like, wait, Saint Jose Escriva, you know, some other saints in the Novus Ordo that have been canonized, you know, of questionable doctrine, and it just didn't make sense to him. So he started studying too, and providentially he was, you know, looking into, okay, the possibility that the Vatican II pontiff was not actually the true vicar of Christ. So that all came into a head point in the middle of 2007. My second term or second year in Australia was very difficult for me. I felt, I really felt it. Like, I'm like, this place is killing my spirit, and I almost just wanted to give up and go home. And just
did you find the minor seminary experience different than like your chapel experience going there? I mean, because you live there, I guess, so you're around. I don't know how that. You know, I've never experienced
yes,
like a boarding place. So
yes.
I don't
You know,
like this, So would you say like okay, so I'm assuming while you were going to the SSPX chapel, it was a good experience?
For the most part, yeah. There were some priests I thought were mean, but for the
Yeah.
most part, it wasn't. Some other priests were kind and zealous and seemed to care about my soul. But I
Did they
couldn't
do,
say any of the priests in Australia were kind, and they didn't seem to care about my soul or spirituality or even my vocation. At least I didn't feel that way. Like I was never taken aside or just had like a heart-to-heart conversation with any of the priests about my vocation. There was a lot of emphasis on getting good grades in school, and getting some of the teachers we used IGCSE. It's a curriculum from England, and some teachers were very like, this is a really good curriculum, and you can go to college after this and blah blah blah. And I just felt like, isn't this a minor seminary? Like maths and science, shouldn't they come like second? What about the spiritual life? We weren't given any direction in that. It was
so
quite appalling, actually.
so your okay, so your parents were coming to, they're asking certain questions. So at some point, I guess they became more open to you going there, or how did that change?
So I was praying really hard in 2007 because I was just feeling the weight. It was oppressive, really oppressive.
And
I
you
know
weren't
it's hard.
alone. You weren't alone in these feelings, right, Father? You're saying?
Yeah, my best friend had graduated. Well, I wasn't alone in these feelings, no, because I talked to other seminarians about it. But second year was much harder because I knew it now. Like I couldn't play ignorance anymore, and I saw like how they treated the boys, or and the bad effects that was happening
Okay.
to many of the boys who were getting more angry and more worldly. And I started resenting the superiors too, because it seemed like they were playing people against each other and saying things that didn't appear to be true. So I was feeling that internal anger as well, which I was like, I don't like this. I'm not supposed to be angry towards my superiors. So I begged my parents, and like, look, can we pray? I really don't want to stay here, but I don't want to go against God's will. I'm like, can we pray before my 17th birthday for a clear sign from God, whether I should stay here or not? And God gave me that sign. The second year I was in Australia, I was there on a student visa because Father Scott didn't want us to be under the radar. Otherwise, he would have to use the very liberal curriculum of the Australian government.
Mm-hmm.
So we technically weren't legally studying, and I had to fly the American boys had to fly every 3 months, either back to the US or New Zealand, which was the closest foreign country. And on my second trip back from New Zealand, I was pulled aside from in customs. I'm like, oh boy. But I knew at the same time, I was like, this is scary. I was 16. I'm like, this is the sign. This is it. It's going to happen. And I was interrogated for like 3 hours in a side room. And in the conclusion, they're like, I couldn't really hide the fact that I was studying. I mean, what is a 16-year-old boy doing?
Right.
Like that? And they're like, well, if you want to study, you have to have a student visa and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. I talked to Father Scott. He's like, well, that's not a possibility, and I guess you have to go back to the US. I'm like, I didn't express my joy to him that I was leaving, but I was extremely relieved and
So it kind of happened
grateful.
naturally. You left
Yeah,
naturally without making a scene, kind of thing.
correct.
Okay. All right. I was curious. I was curious if like you raised your banner up and were like, I was just wondering that, like how it actually came about. But so it just happened naturally, and so you're like, okay, great. I don't have to come back here, and that's my
Yeah,
excuse. My excuse was the visa.
it was interesting because I was like the first. There were other American boys traveling too, but I was the first one pulled aside. It was just so clear God's finger. It was a direct answer to my prayer.
Okay. All right. So let's get into getting into is it Omaha, right? The minor seminary?
No, that's in Rathdrum, Idaho.
Okay. So let's get into that. I guess your parents eventually said, okay. I'm assuming they were not. I don't know what their thoughts are on the CMRI, but there must have been like.
It was interesting because providentially, my dad had just found out about the CMRI, and he had been looking to it like a few months before I came home. So or that was even back in 2006. So he was getting somewhat familiar with the group. What I did I was home basically the whole month of August in 2007, and I decided, like, okay, I'll give the Society of St. Pius X one more shot, one more chance to redeem itself. So I put in an application for Our Lady of La Salette Boys School, run by Father McMahon in Illinois.
Is that still around?
I think so, yes.
Okay, just curious.
And I also put in my application to Father Benedict, St. Joseph Minor Seminary in Rathdrum, Idaho, with the seminary. And I said, look, my parents are poor. We can't really afford the full tuition. And we left it at that. Father McMahon replied, sorry, we can't accept you. Father Benedict's like, come. I'm like, yes. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to the SSPX because it really left more than a bad taste in my mouth. And having discussed with my brother, I'm like, I think these problems are more than just this minor seminary. So yeah, I went to St. Joseph Minor Seminary in Rathdrum, Idaho in the fall of 2007.
Okay. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your time with the CMRI, maybe, what it was like initially?
Sure. Yeah, it was a very different story from Australia. It was much smaller, but also it was those were, I have to honestly say, those were two of the happiest years of my life. I was very happy there.
At the minor seminary at the CMRI.
When I first went there, one lady there, she said, "You're gonna love it here," and it was true. I did love it there. Father Benedict was very solicitous, and we all lived in the top story of the large building, and in small rooms in the dormitory. The chapel was also in the same building. It was very nice to have our Lord there. The CMI priests are different from the SSPX. They're a little more, they're not so tight, Sometimes that Jansenistic spirit, I have to say, some of those priests in the SSPX are very intense, very tight. CMI is more American, just a little more relaxed, a little more open. But most importantly, Father Benedict actually cared about our spiritual life. He gave us spiritual conferences every week, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. They were wonderful every Thursday. Gave us spiritual books to read every month. We had a book to read. Emphasized devotion to Our Lady. Emphasized practicing virtue, respecting him, respecting the other seminarians. He wouldn't tolerate disrespect to himself, which is weird in Australia because there was a lot of disrespect. Everyone disrespected everyone, not always directly, but indirectly, and just wasn't good. There were some very kind ladies there who cooked for us and bought us, things that we might need, shampoo or undershirts or whatever. It had almost a sort of family feel to it, which was nice because I came from a very affectionate, close-knit family, and it had that feel to it.
Well, you're not with the CMRI, so I'm assuming there was a change.
Yeah. So
I
finished high school and the minor seminary.
All right.
After 2 years, and then I graduated in May of 2009. Well, I forgot to tell a very important thing too. Obviously,
go ahead.
When I first went to the minor seminary, I wasn't really sedevacant, you could say. My dad and I had discussed it over the summer, and I started questioning things. An important question for me that was posed was like, can the Catholic Church, the Bride of Christ, who is which was founded to save souls, can it give the faithful poison? That is, poison in faith or doctrines or liturgy. Doctrine, liturgy, or morals that are harmful to souls, that could lead souls to hell. Can the church give us that poison? And it would seem the Recognize and Resist group would kind of have to say yes, because they would say the Novus Ordo Mass is bad, but it comes from the true church. These teachings of Vatican II are bad, but they come from the true church.
Yeah, I've heard him say the Mass is evil, which yes, sure, yeah, it is. But I've heard him say things like, "But it's not coming from the church." You heard that? Make that dichotomy? I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of I don't agree with that logic, but
it's not logical. Either it's coming from the church, or what it's coming from is not the church.
Right, exactly.
This is the official teaching of this church, what most people assume is the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
But Father Benedict gave me some literature when I first entered, and I think from Father Cicada and such, and I was like, okay, this is really clear. He's not Pope.
All right. So you graduated third minor seminary in 2019.
You said 2009.
What did I say? 19. 2009. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, 2009.
I'm not that young.
Then, so in 2009, you graduated there. Did you? Where did you go from there?
From there, I went to the major seminary, Mater Dei Seminary in Omaha with Bishop Pivrunas.
Okay.
I still had. I mean, it was hard not to compare society and the CMRI. That's mostly what I knew. So in my mind, it was still always comparing. I had some slight misgivings, but after 2 years of being in the CMRI, I'm like, I think it'll be okay. So I entered Omaha with Bishop Pivrunas in the fall of 2009. That was another story, different one, the different experience from both St. Joseph Minor Seminary in Idaho and also from Holy Cross Seminary in Australia.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What was different? Or what was different?
Obviously, it was a major seminary, so we were studying, higher subjects, philosophy and Latin and church history more intensely. No more math and no more science. Just all those subjects. The first year went pretty smoothly, I would say. But then the second year, I started seeing more things as well that I didn't like, or things that weren't there. If I had to summarize it, I guess I would say to you what I said to Bishop Pivrunas when I decided to leave after 2 years. I said I and many other seminarians feel that the training here is inadequate for several reasons. For instance, there was not a whole lot of, or even any discussion during classes, especially with Father Gregory. He's not teaching there anymore. But it was just, they turned into reading sessions. Marcellus take a paragraph, other seminarian take another paragraph and try to answer. Poor Father Gregory was definitely overworked. Monday mornings, he was like a zombie. Sometimes I remember once he fell asleep in class. And he had like 3 hours of sleep after having a run of, several mass missions over the weekend, driving like 14 hours. Nice guy, but not professor material. I think he felt antagonized by young men who really wanted to learn deeply, and he would shrug his shoulders many times, literally like not knowing questions to answers and not being able to discuss them. I and then several other seminarians, we talked a lot. We were like, it's not right. Like for instance, the course that they used, or probably still use for theology, is a course by Pope Preuss. it's interesting because Loretto Publications is now printing that new, and
Okay.
they're Feeneyites. So they're like the great Father Feeney, you know, who was called by his Jesuit superiors one of the greatest theologians of our times. He used these books in seminary when he went to Jesuit seminary. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Because they're manuals of moral theology, meaning they're, you could say, abridged versions of what better seminaries would use. You know, manuals like more, generally it's not for deep study, it's for quick study or reference.
Mm-hmm.
And we found, some of the seminarians found the tract on grace, for instance, and the tract on the Blessed Virgin Mary really bad. Like, for instance, the one with Our Lady, I felt like the author was trying to cut down her prerogatives as far as he could without becoming heretical. It was quite appalling. we were discussing that as seminarians. We're like, why are we using this book? Let's just read Saint Louis Marie Grignon de Montfort's True Devotion to Mary. That's a much better tract on Mariology than this thing. And then, like, another book we were using was Bible History by Knecht. It was written for like 8th graders. Literally, we were looking at each other like, "What is this?" It was, you know, not heretical, but it was just like, Bishop Pyrrhunus, his thing is really like Mass and sacraments. That's his big thing. He's always emphasizing that. And kudos to the CMRI, like, they're able to do that a lot. They have a lot of missions, and their priests like travel sometimes insanely, but, you know, for the benefit of the faithful, to bring them the Mass and the sacraments. Like, that's his big thing. That's he likes to use the term meat and potatoes. So that's really their forte, if you ask me, from what I see. What we were missing, especially, I had been to Australia with the SSPX. We had solemn high mass every single Sunday, you know, with beautiful Gregorian chant, deacon and subdeacon, benediction, you know, quite a lot of liturgy. And other seminarians who had been either with the SSPX, or there were 4 seminarians who had been there from 3 seminarians there who had been with Bishop Sanborn in Florida too, so they couldn't help but compare as well certain things. So honestly, and, you know, I want to say this with all love and constructive criticism, I know this will probably get back to the CMRI, Bishop Pyrrhunus is not very big on the liturgy. He's just not. He'll say it himself, no ceremony. Like, he's not good at it. He doesn't have much of a love for it. It's just a lot of low masses, and he almost gave the impression, like, you know, more Gregorian chant or singing an incense to him is somewhat unnecessary fluff, unnecessary additions. Whereas we were like starving for a high mass. We had the means to do it. We had seminarians who could sing. We had enough boys who could serve, and we rarely got high masses, even on big feasts. It was like 1 or 2 high masses a month. Like, we could have had a high mass every single Sunday. So
that was the difference that you noticed between the CMRI and the SSPX minors and major seminaries.
Yeah, definitely. Among some other things too.
Sure.
A big thing that bothered me too was sort of the standards with modesty, especially women's modesty in the CMRI. I thought was quite lax, to be honest, especially in Omaha.
You're talking about like at the local chapel level, like attending chapels, or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like, I remember, for instance, one summer, you know, there was one girl playing hockey or something in the parking lot. She was wearing like fairly, you know, short shorts, you know, short as in between the knee and hip. And her mother had come into the seminary building during the summer. There wasn't really anyone there except me. And she was, you know, like wearing rather short shorts as well. Talking with Father Gregory, and I'm like, no one's saying anything about these. And some of those girls were boarding girls with the sisters, and they wear pants quite a lot, or other things which I think traditional Catholics should very strongly avoid. It seemed to me like they're around priests and nuns all the time, especially the boarding students. Why are they not? They should be in skirts like basically all the time. It's that quite bothered me. And after 2 years there, I felt first of all, sometimes I take the priesthood very seriously, and it's on my soul how I preach, the advice I give or don't give in the confessional. If I don't know my stuff, I could damn myself if I give wrong advice, or if I'm not well trained, I could be speaking heresy or whatever. I felt very insecure, to be honest. I felt we're going really fast through these courses. In 3 years from now, I'll probably be ordained. Bishop Priesthood generally runs about 5 years, the seminary training, and some have been ordained in 4.5 years. I can count them. And I felt like I'm going to be up in the altar, I'm going to be in the confessional, I'm going to be at the pulpit, and I'm not going to have confidence. I'm not going to be able to preach well, because we weren't, I don't know if they have a course. I hope they will on preaching, because I don't think they had. I saw the other seminarians get ordained. I'm like, did they even have practice with preaching? Or Gregorian chant we did on our own. There was no formal class on that except practicing for tenebrae. Yeah, I didn't have anywhere to go, really. I didn't want to go to Sanborn because I felt he was going to have too much of the same spirit that I didn't want in Australia, because he was trained by the SSPX. And I felt that vibe from him very strongly. And I felt that it wasn't right that he denied communion to people who went to unicum masses or called it a mortal sin. So I was praying again, and I was going to go back to Omaha, but at the end of the year, a seminarian left, and his sisters asked the then Father Ramolla, hey, can you help him? He still wants to be a priest.
This is a different seminarian, you said, right?
Yeah, from Omaha.
Okay.
So Father Ramolla, because this issue was also very much in his heart since his time with Bishop Sanborn in Holy Trinity Seminary in Florida, he too was quite critical of some of the things that weren't being taught or some of the things that were being done. And he opened up a major seminary in Fairfield, Ohio, connected to the church he was working at, which was a St. Albert the Great church.
Okay. St. Albert the Great Church, is that, and Father Ramolla at the time, was that affiliated with any particular bishop?
No. Well, yes. Let me rewind a little bit. So after Father Ramolla left St. Gertrude the Great, when he had the controversy with Bishop Dolan over the school, he founded St. Albert the Great Church in Fairfield. And then he was looking for bishops. He had reached out to Bishop Priesthood at one time. I don't know what exactly happened, but Bishop Priesthood, I don't think, ever actually did come out for confirmations. And then Bishop Paul Petco, I guess you could say Father Ramolla was loosely working with him at that time in 2011 when I left Omaha and then came to St. Albert the Great in the fall of that year.
Okay, so just to summarize what you're saying, there was a seminarian at the CMRI that you knew, or I'm assuming that left the CMRI, contacted or got a hold of the then Father Ramolla, who was operating St. Bouchard,
St. Albert
the Great Chapel, and he had issues. Excuse me. He had issues going with whatever was going on with him and Bishop Dolan, correct?
Yes.
Father. Okay. So he left there and started St. Albert the Great. And it was around this time that the seminarian who left made contact with Father Ramolla and then you must have knew him. So then that's how you got to meet Father Ramolla.
So I have to rewind a little bit.
Okay.
I know it's a bit complicated, especially if people don't know the characters involved. So I'll try to make it understandable.
Sure.
That in November of 2009, that's when Father Ramolla left St. Gertrude the Great, and then started St. Albert's. I had met him personally in 2010. He came out to visit Bishop Pivrunas in Omaha at the seminary, and from that point on, I really liked him, and we had good discussions, and it was nice because I actually could discuss stuff with a priest. So
do you mind if I ask, just interrupt a little quickly, how he loosely affiliated with the seminary at all, or what was the reason he would meet with?
He was trying to work together with Bishop Pivrunas, at least have Bishop Pivrunas come out and do confirmations for his faithful.
Up there at St. Albert the Great's, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So he was coming to talk to Bishop Pivrunas. It just never panned out. It never worked out.
Okay.
So I had met him in 2010. We hit off really well, and I remained in contact with him after the summer of 2010, as well as some other seminarians that were in Omaha. It was just nice to have an outside opinion, outside thoughts, talking about issues in the traditional movement, issues in the seminary. So I talked quite a bit with him.
Okay.
So when he opened up the seminary, it was again another prayer for me answered.
It was at this point that you I'm guessing you let Bishop Pivrunas know, hey, I'm gonna go here, or how did that?
Yes.
You gotta go all the details, but like, would you say you left freely, or would they say you left freely, or would they say, hey, we kicked you out of here? What would the CMR say?
That's funny because I say they gave me the boot as I was walking out the door. So
okay.
this is how it happened. I've been, I'm thinking about this the whole last semester a lot, praying, and then I found out about another bishop being consecrated, Bishop Petco, and then I bought a return ticket to Omaha, honestly, for September of 2011 because there was no other option for me. And then in the summer of that year, Father Ramolla opens up the seminary at St. Albert the Great. And
just for those who may not know, you said this all comes from the Took line, correct?
Yes.
Bishop Ramolla. And you had mentioned a Bishop Petco. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah. He was a fraternity of St. Peter priest who got conditionally ordained and then consecrated a bishop by Bishop Francis Schlupski.
Okay.
Who's also a Took line bishop.
All right. So well, I mean, all these CMRI and Bishop Samber, we're all Took line. So this is just another branch of the Took line, basically. Another.
Yes.
I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, Pivrunas is Took line, Bishop Samber Took line, Bishop Dolan's Took line, and this is just another one of them.
Correct.
I don't know exactly their history, but okay. And Father was working with Bishop Petco and Slupke.
He wasn't working with Schlupski, no. Just with Petco. Loosely. Yeah.
All right. So then you talked so you talked with Bishop Pivrunas and you said, all right.
Yeah. So Father Ramolla, So Father Ramolla says, "Oh, I started a seminary. Are you joining?" I'm like, "Yes." And I was going to tell Bishop Pivrunas I was going to write him a letter, but he got wind of it before I could get to him, and he called me on July 13th in 2011, and he's like, "Are you joining? Are you leaving? And are you joining? Father Ramolla's seminary?" I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "Uh-oh, this is not going to be good."
Why do you think this would not be good? Is because they invested a lot of time in you, or?
Yeah, sure. Yes, for sure. It wasn't just. So it was the other seminarian. It was myself, and then two other seminarians, a Frenchman and a German, who had been in quite a bit in contact with Father Ramolla. Bishop Pivrunas felt it was behind his back, which it kind of was. Although for me, it was like kind of a last minute decision thing. There was no definite plans to open up a seminary at St. Albert's until that seminarian left. So, Bishop Pivarunas felt betrayed, and
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry that he felt that way, because honestly, I wasn't. It was there was no long-term plan to open up a seminary at St. Albert the Great. It kind of happened very suddenly.
Okay, so I'm getting it. So, not to give the seminary's name or whatever, but he left, the one that initially left, and he obviously left, assuming left on not good terms.
Correct.
So he left on not good terms. You guys kind of go along where he's going, and it looks like there's like a revolt or something, maybe, or because like a bunch of you leave to go up in that direction. So maybe he saw. I'm just guessing here. Maybe Bishop, His Excellency, maybe thought, hey, like, you guys are all part of the same bad crowd.
Yeah, clique or whatever. I thoroughly understand. I mean, we're not cut out of the same cloth. We just weren't fitting. They weren't. Each group has its own attitude, its own way of doing things, and they were Europeans. They had different experiences, even myself, and either we were gonna like become more CMRI-ish or hold on to like what we thought was better. So not only he was losing base, I totally understand on a human level how he felt offended and all that, and then I just, at that point, I felt courageous enough to, on the phone, basically criticize him to his face, or the seminarian. I said what I said, that many seminarians, and I won't name him, but there's one or two seminarians that I talked to who are now priests with the CMRI who were also critical of the seminary.
You don't need name. All right.
Which is normal, actually. Seminarians are critical of seminaries. It's a normal thing.
Yeah, I bet you're probably right. I bet you like Bishop Dolan or Bishop Sanborn or maybe Bishop Pivarunas. I don't know, but like maybe they were like had those same kind of feelings, maybe going through wherever they in their training and with their superiors. Maybe do you think? I bet maybe that's a common thing, or maybe not. I don't know, but I could see.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely. Like with Sanborn, he had his own issues with SSPX as he went through, theologically and liturgically.
So this is kind of interesting insight into like seminary life, because someone who never been to a seminary, well, never been to a priest seminary. I was ordained to the PCA, but Presbyterian Church in America. But there's all that's inner. Maybe the things we'll never see, like I'll never see. The layman will never see, is all the internal struggles and even growth or fights, arguments with the who knows what's going on as your maybe as your formation being formed in the seminary is probably I can see that. I'm just picturing what's going on here.
I mean, I was a young hothead, I would say, as well. So I definitely could have done this in a quieter, nicer way, but he sort of pinned me down. And I said what I said. Many seminarians think the training here is insufficient. He didn't like that at all. Like, that's a bunch of baloney. I've been doing this for 20 years. And
I'm sure we all look back in hindsight, think we could have done things better, or not done things better, but address things or handle things differently.
And I feel it too. I mean, he does, there are 2 years of teaching those seminarians, and it's basically lost on him. I totally understand that on a human level. That's very understandable that he would be upset. All
right, let's we'll move on to away from the CMRI, because you've left and you're with now. Well, then Father Ramolla, correct? After you've departed the CMRI seminary with the other seminarians. He is not yet a bishop at this time, correct?
Correct, yeah. So, I had a lot of new... Now it's a different story. Had a lot of great hopes with St. Albert the Great, and Father Ramolla seemed to be starting off very well. But the fact that he had taken on basically 4 seminarians, ex-seminarians from Bishop Pivarunas, and publicly in one bulletin said one line of criticism against the Omaha, against Mater Dei Seminary.
No.
That didn't go over very well, and some of the faithful didn't like it either. So that basically ended any chance of working together with Bishop Piparunas.
And this, what year was this, would you say?
This was the fall of 2011.
Okay, so it's been a little bit of time has passed. Before we get to your story, do you think wounds have healed? Yeah. Or between we can get into that. I don't know if wounds, if that's going to take you off a far tap. But
I guess you might have to ask Bishop Piparunas. I don't have
contact with him or talk with him much.
No, not much. I don't. The other problem is too. We'll have to get to that too. Is with Bishop Ramolla's consecration and how they view it.
Okay.
They always, I guess, sort of use that as a prod against him and then against me, since I've been ordained by him. But people, I was there the whole time, so I know the story better than most. They get to judge outside.
You're with Father Ramolla. You're with the other seminarians that left, that came from the CMRI. Did any of them come from any of the other groups, or were they all from CMRI?
Yeah, they were all from the CMRI. They were all from Omaha.
Okay. All right. Okay. So So now you're all going to St. Albert the Great.
Yeah.
With Father Ramolla, trying to
yes.
starting up a seminary and or whatever, and getting trained by him. And now that's another challenge.
Yes.
I would imagine.
It started off, it seemed well. Father Ramolla was very energetic and classes were great. We were, learning the liturgy and high masses. Bishop Pecco was teaching a couple of classes, and another man who was very highly trained by the Dominicans in Columbus. He had been teaching us as well. He was teaching me. Father Hall was also teaching long distance. He was in England at the time. Then in October, stuff just hit the fan big time.
October of 2011?
Yeah. Like just, a month and a half into the seminary. I don't want to get into all the details, but basically some of the seminarians believe that Bishop Pecco was behaving in a certain way towards them that they didn't like at all.
Okay.
And that made Father Ramolla very angry, and he kicked out Bishop Pecco, and everything went downhill from then, because the board and the faithful were like, oh, we just lost another bishop and we're all alone. And some other people felt that Bishop Pecco was treated unfairly and didn't have a chance to defend himself. And he had a bunch of young seminarians who were, I would say we were hotheads at the time, so everything just went downhill from there in regard to St. Albert the Great, the church, and the seminary. And it became, emails and threats of lawsuits, and
it came crashing down. That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
So we don't have to get all the details, but is that particular chapel still around?
Not exactly. So fast forward to spring, Easter time of 2012, struggles with the board, trying to defend Father Ramolla or just keep the church alive in the seminary. Some people felt like the seminary should go and just focus on the church, and Father Ramolla was more and more like, no, the seminary is important and the seminarians are important. Eventually we got a new board, and on Easter week they told Father Ramolla, like, basically, we don't want you anymore. We're going to go to the CMRI with Bishop Piparunas. They have sisters and they have a bigger group. And that was sort of the end of that chapter. It was it was quite devastating because we really tried to fight to keep St. Albert the Great going and keep up our dream, and it just crashed down quite spectacularly. But around the same time too, and even prior to that, Bishop Francis Slupski had offered episcopal consecration to Father Ramolla, like, I can make you a bishop. And Father Ramolla was very hesitant to do that because Slupski was a Redemptorist priest in Poland, ordained prior to Vatican II. He came over to the United States, got consecrated by Bishop McKenna, Duke Bishop. The problem with Slupski, it seemed he almost had this idea, sort of like Hitler at the end of World War II. The Russians are coming. We're in a terrible, desperate situation. Here's a rifle. Give it to a 10-year-old. Go shoot a Russian. It seemed he had a similar attitude towards the priesthood. Here's a young man.
He's just ordaining anybody and everybody.
Yeah, like, we're in the last days of the church. I just need to multiply priests and bishops, whether they're trained or not, whether they're qualified or not. So, a lot of people avoided Slupski very much because of that. So he was he was kind of known. Slupski was kind of known for this kind of reckless laying on of hands. Yes. Yeah, they had been in touch for a while, a couple of years, and as Slupski, who he was, he offered me ordination before too. I was ready, and I'm like, no. So unfortunately, we were too desperate. I was too. And this is my fault, and the other seminarian. By the end of it, we were down to 2 because the others just they were done. So Father, we were also pressuring Father Ramolla, like, you should do this. We've lost everything. Just become a bishop. At least we know that's a promise of us becoming priests if you're a bishop. So reluctantly, after Bishop Ramolla had Slupski promise to stop ordaining married priests and untrained priests, he said, okay, I'll accept consecration from you. And Bishop Slupski did promise to do that. It seemed like he didn't keep his promise. However, Slupski was not really his consecrator. His consecrator was Bishop Robert Dymek, whom no one really knows much. He was ordained and consecrated by Bishop Slupski, but he had been married. It seemed like, I can't tell if the vocation was from God or not, but I think he was separated from his wife and or left them at one point, his wife and his children, and he decided to give his life to God. And he was ordained and then consecrated by Bishop Slupski. And it seemed like he was doing, when Slupski was getting a bit older and of ill health, that he was doing a lot of these consecrations and ordinations that Slupski would tell him to do. So on May 23rd, 2012, we only told a group of very small friends because we were sick of the controversy and the hatred and the vitriol from a lot of people. We were like, we got to do this in secret. So, just a few of us were there at the consecration in Rockford, Illinois on May 23rd, 2012. And Bishop Dymek consecrated Father Ramolla a bishop.
Where did it take place? Did it take place in the chapel?
Yes, a small chapel. It was a very nice chapel, actually. It looked like, I think it was a large garage that they turned into a chapel in Rockford, Illinois.
Did it belong to any particular priest or person? Can you share that, or? And it's still
I'm not
around
exactly
today?
sure to whom it belonged. I know that Slupski would say mass there.
Okay. All right. So he was ordained a bishop through much turmoil and confusing and possibly doubtful times.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. I said, all right. So then he was, and then shortly, I don't know how much longer after that, then you were ordained by Bishop Ramolla then, correct?
Yeah, then it was like me going back. He had to go back to Germany because St. Albert the Great was no longer supporting his visa. He had to go back to Germany. I went to Germany several times, continuing studying with him. Went back to Hawaii, sometimes to Ohio, continuing my studies with him in person or online. And there wasn't much support for him in Germany at first, so there were still some people enough here in Ohio who are like, we want Father Ramolla back or Bishop Ramolla back, and they were able to rent a space, do all the paperwork from ground up, basically, and get a visa for him, which was finally approved in 2015, and then he came back and we opened up Our Lady of Victory Chapel, which was at first in Mason, Ohio, in that small space in the mall. And then I, continued my studies, 2016, studying, and then I was ordained at the end of 2016.
I think I saw that video that you guys have it recorded. It's on your channel, correct?
Yes.
I think I saw. Yeah. Okay. And then you basically, you've been there. You and Bishop Ramolla have been there pretty much ever since, correct? And doing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
At your church, do they do the pre-55?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that's okay, because that's probably what Father or Bishop Ramolla, when he was going through seminary, that's what he did, correct? I'm assuming.
Yes,
that's
what St. Gertrude the Great does. That's what Sanborn does.
Okay, so your church also does the pre-55 as well.
In that sense, CMRI is somewhat of an oddball in the Sedevacantist movement. Almost all the other Sedevacantists do not do the 58 liturgy.
Yeah, that's that is interesting. Going through all the stuff that you went through, okay, going through the SSPX minor seminary, the CMRI minor seminary, and then the stuff going on with Bishop Ramolla and all the stuff. What advice? I don't know, maybe we didn't discuss this question, but what advice would you give someone who is wanting to be a priest in the traditional world today? If someone was asking. Is that
stay close to Our Lady, say the rosary every day. She helped me out through the difficult times, and don't expect any seminary to be perfect.
Okay.
If you have to be critical, and you should, critical as in have a critical thinking, because every leader, every person should be able to have critical thinking. Take what's good where good comes from, and whatever's bad, try to know what it is, and don't look for any one bishop in the traditional movement, any one group for your end all be all, because it's not. And if we're looking for that, it turns into a cult, and we can't do that. If we don't have a pope, visible head of Christ on earth, we have to be careful not to be cult followers. No one's perfect. The bride of Christ, the church of Christ as a whole, is perfect. But you can't say this one particular group is the Church of Christ. That would pervert it and make it a pernicious and personal cult.
What are some of the issues that you wish traditional Catholics could come together on?
That's a good question. One thing that I was surprised when I first went to the CMRI, right? Sedevacantism was like new to me. I thought this is going to be like, they're going to be really strict, and this is going to be like number one thing. They're going to be like, we got to pray for a true pope. We got to pray for a true pope. They're going to be preaching that. They're going to be like pushing that. And I was surprised. I'm like, they seem like kind of cool. Like, life is more or less good or whatever. But the more I think about it, I'm like, this is terrible. This is horrible. Some people come to the Sedevacante conclusion and they're like, this is great. I'm like, no, this is horrible. it's good if you know the truth, but if the truth is the truth that we have an imposter on the see of Peter right now, if we've had false popes since 1958, the consequences are horrible. And I see it every day as a priest, in family life and in society and among clergy. One thing we should come together as sedevacantists especially, and not even, even the Recognize and Resist and whoever else is out there questioning what's happening in Rome right now, pray with your whole heart every single day fervently for God to send us a true pope. We need that so badly. We need the hierarchy to be renewed. We need none of these bishops, Bishop Ramolla, Bishop Pirino, Sanborn, the solution is not going to come from them. I'm repeating myself what I said in the 3 Days of Darkness video, but we should all pray for that very fervently. We can't be satisfied. Oh, I got my little chapel, my little priest, I'm happy. Like, no, like the world is in a terrible state. The church is not, this is not the right state of the church either. We don't have a visible head. We have to realize this is a terrible crisis, and not to be depressed about it at all or discouraged, but to fight really hard for God's mercy to come down and send us a true pope, however he wills to do it. And I think the mystics have told us how it will happen. I believe that's how it will happen. That St. Peter and Paul will designate the one to be the true pope. That's what Anna Maria Tigi said. I personally believe that. You don't have to believe that, but I don't see the solution coming from man. No.
What have been some of your greatest joys as a priest, and some of the most difficult things about being a priest?
Difficult is when they're not working with the grace of God, and like you're trying very hard, but especially a lot of times marital issues, those are very difficult. Human relationships can be very difficult. A priest has to deal with a lot of different humans on different levels, all different kinds. Human relations can be very difficult, especially if people aren't trying to live according to right virtue and God's laws. When people aren't living morally, and young people lose their faith, go off with their girlfriend or boyfriend and stop coming to mass. Those are very painful and difficult. The joys, on the other hand, seeing souls, truly striving to love God with their whole hearts, minds, and strength. I have to say, one of my experiences as a priest of great happiness was when I conditionally baptized a Baptist couple, former Protestants whom I had catechized, and they live as very, very devout Catholics now. That's a great joy.
Nice.
Obviously to offer the Mass every day and to give our Lord to others in communion is a great joy as well, of course.
And I guess it's just kind of conclude. Do you see that it could be possible one day that you and that Bishop Ramolla would be able to build some bridges with these other larger sedevacantist groups? Or do you see anything of that happening at the moment? Because it's been many years since whatever happened with then Father Ramolla with the Bishop Dolan's group, or yourself with the CMRI. Years
I
now.
hope for it, and we have tried. Like Bishop Ramolla, to his credit, has reached out, for instance, several times to Bishop Dolan before he passed away. Never really got a response. I'm definitely willing on my side to walk the walk and talk the talk. If they're willing, I'll talk. I think that should happen. I don't see why we shouldn't be able to at least talk. Let's start with some dialogue. Not in the sense of the false ecumenistic sense of Vatican II, but when you start talking with someone, it helps break down barriers, and that can be a good start. I have have bridged some gaps with some people. So
All right. So, Father, what's a way people can get a hold of you if they want? Is there got a website or kind of whatnot if people are curious about maybe if they're in the area, you know what I mean, to go to mass?
yeah, definitely. We have our blog spot, Our Lady of Victory Chapel, .blogspot.com. Then we post our sermons and bulletins on there, as well as our contact information, my personal cell phone number, Bishop Ramolla's cell phone number, our email. Generally is probably is a good way to contact us. Our Lady of Victory at mail.com. That's the church's email. That's a good way to contact us.
All right. Father, I appreciate you doing this and being interviewed and hearing your story. I'm sure it's a unique one, so,
Every story is, yeah, everyone has their own story for sure.
So I appreciate it, Father. Do you want to give us a blessing?
Yes, sure. Thanks for doing the interview with me, Gregory. I appreciate it too.
Not a problem.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper.
Amen.